bypass your major protection, and they say, well, it's 1/10 of a microgram per kilogram body weight. It was just faulty logic. It just absolutely faulty.
Would oral vaccines therefore present a safer method?
Yes. Anything you take orally, I mean, you have a real protection. I mean, you know, going from your mouth till it goes outside your body on the other end, you have a lot of protection to get rid of stuff that shouldn't be in the body. I mean, we have trouble getting drugs absorbed orally. I mean, that's how tight that system is. So it would have been, if you could do that, it would have been better. But it would have been better, you know, you can come up with a lot of delivery systems, but nothing could have been worse than injecting it directly in the body with a bolus amount of an organic material. It is not sound science to say ethyl mercury would behave like methyl mercury. That's not sound science. It's a good first assumption, but what you do is you do safety tests. And what we can say about the CDC and the Vaccine Board and the Institute of Medicine totally, you know, gave them free. They didn't do any safety testing of that vaccine, you know, on infant mice, infant monkeys, or anything. The experimental animal was the infant American baby.
It's as heart-wrenching as it gets, autism in children. 6 out of every 1,000 kids get it, and nobody knows exactly why. But my next guest says he's got part of the blame that he thinks needs to fall on government, and it has to do with a drug called thimerosal. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is a senior attorney for the Natural Resources Defense Council. He's author of Deadly Immunity in the current issue of Rolling Stone. It's an investigation of the possible connection between thimerosal and autism in young kids. Hey, Bobby, thanks a lot. And, of course, you also have
Thanks, Joe.
A great new book. Tell us briefly about that.
First of all, let me say that the Deadly Immunity piece on thimerosal is also running on Salon.com simultaneously. The two magazines ran at the same time. My new book is St. Francis of Assisi, A Life of Joy. It's a children's book. I grew up reading books about the saints, but I couldn't find one that would hold my computer-age children's attention, and so I tried to write a book that had the kind of action and, you know, engaging story that would also teach them the values, and it's done very, very well, and I'm very happy with it.
Well, we want to get you back to talk about that, but let's talk tonight about thimerosal. There are a lot of people out there. When I was practicing law, in fact, I need to say this, we actually practice in the same law firm, no lawsuits regarding thimerosal, so we can get that off the record. But still, there are a lot of people, a lot of Americans, very concerned about the impact of this drug, which is found in vaccines, and how it causes autism. Talk about that.
Thimerosal is a preservative that was put in vaccines back in the 1930s. Almost immediately after it was put in, autism cases began to appear. Autism had never been known before. It was unknown to science. Then the vaccines were increased in 1989 by the CDC and by a couple of other government agencies.
Okay, let me stop you there. That's an important date, and I'll tell you why. My son, born in 1991, has a slight form of autism called Asperger's. But it seems, and again, when I was practicing law, and also when I was in Congress, parents would constantly come to me, and they'd bring me videotapes of their children, and they were all around the age of my son or younger.
The
generation, something happened in 1989.
Exactly. What happened was the vaccine schedule was increased. We went up from receiving about 10 vaccines in our generation to these kids received 24 vaccines. And they all had this thimerosal in them, this mercury, and nobody bothered to do an analysis of what the cumulative impact of all that mercury was doing to kids. As it turns out, we are injecting our children with 400 times the amount of mercury that FDA or EPA considers safe. A child on his first day that he's born is injected with a hepatitis B shot. Under EPA guidelines, he would have to be 275 pounds to safely absorb that shot.
And yet we're just constantly pumping our kids with these vaccines. Where's the federal government?
What happened was that in 1988, 1 in every 2,500 American children had autism. Today, 1 in every 166 children have autism, and plus 1 in 6 children have other kinds of learning disorders, other kinds of neurological disorders, speech delay, language disorders, ADD, hyperactivity. that all seem to be connected, that are all connected, the science shows are all connected to autism.
You know, Bobby, what we've always found, you and I could debate 1,000 different issues, whether it's Terry Schiavo or the environment. I think would agree on the environment. But in this case, you've got the federal government coming in saying, well, there's no good science. And of course, in politics, science always gets diluted. Why hasn't the federal government stepped up and worked more? Because listen, Bobby, I can't prove it tonight. You can't prove it. But intuitively, you look at the spike, you look at what happened with the Marisol, there is no doubt in my mind, maybe it's 2 years from now, maybe it's 5 years from now, maybe it's 10 years from now, we're going to find out that the Marisol causes, in my opinion, autism.
You know what? The science is out there today for anybody who bothers to read it. And I have read it. Actually, on my website this week, robertfkennedyjr.com, I'm publishing an article that goes through all of the science. But the science is clear. And what happens is, I read the science at first, and there's literally hundreds and hundreds of studies that connect thimerosal to these disastrous neurological disorders. Then I talked to the scientists. Then I went and I talked to the federal bureaucrats who are defending thimerosal. And I said, what are you relying on? And I looked at the science they're relying on, and I can tell you, Joe, it is so weak. And you and I have seen, legal practice when junk science, and we know, what these phony scientists are who create this stuff.
It happens in big tobacco.
Right.
It happens in big oil. It's happening in global warming. And now it's happening in a way that's impacting our kids' lives.
This is classic tobacco science. It is junk science. And I was looking at these reports and saying, this is the best. This is what you're relying on. They know it's fraudulent. Okay. And now we have the transcripts.
Explain it to me, Bobby, okay? I mean, explain it to me if that's the case. I mean, you and I both know about politics, obviously. Politicians like to get reelected. Why are they sitting back and if our children are being poisoned, if the science is there, why are they sitting back and letting our children be poisoned?
Because the same regulatory bureaucrats that green-lighted thimerosal originally are now trying to cover their tracks.
It's a CYA operation.
Right, and they're working with the pharmaceutical industry, and we now have the transcripts of this secret meeting that they did in Simpsonwood, Georgia in the year 2000, and it's the most horrifying thing that you can read, Joe. There are scientists there from the government who are reading the reports and saying, this is undeniable, there's no way we can ever deny this, I'm not going to give this to my children, but now let's hide this from the American people. And it is that clear, and this is what I write about. It's this language that I write about in the Rolling Stone piece and the Salon piece that, is so shocking, where we have the guys who are supposed to be protecting Americans' health who are actually conspiring to keep this stuff in the vaccines.
And I can't say what lawsuit we were both involved in. I don't want to say it, but it reminds me of a lawsuit we were involved in a couple of years ago regarding water quality, where the people that polluted in our community and then left our community would have never drank the water that our children grew up drinking. And it's a disaster. It's a disgrace. So, hey, Bobby, thanks for being here tonight. I want you to, if you can come back, we need to talk more about this. And also want to talk about, and I'm going to hold up the book now. We actually lured Bobby in to say that we were going to talk to him about this book, but actually he said he wanted to talk about this instead. I appreciate you being here, Bobby, as always, and let's get you back.
Thanks a lot, Joe.
And let's get you running for a public office. I will defend your honor whenever any Republican says anything nasty.
Well, that counts for a lot. Thanks a lot, Joe.
Yeah, that and a quarter, right? Get you a cup of coffee. We'll be right back in a second in Scarborough Country. Mike, welcome to the show. We appreciate you being on tonight.
Thanks for the invitation, Joe.
Okay, let's talk about the rat of the week. Why is Bayer Corporation the rat of the week?
Internal documents show that after this company positively, absolutely knew that they had a medication that was infected with the AIDS virus, they took the product off the market in the U.S. and then they dumped it in France, Europe, Asia, and Latin America. The medicine's called Factorate. It was an injection medicine that was used for hemophiliacs, mostly children. Children had been born with an incurable disease.
Hold on, Mike. So hold on. So you're telling me that Bayer knew that this drug was infected infected with the AIDS virus. They yanked it from the market in America, and then they dumped it in markets overseas.
They had to figure out a way, Joe, to make a profit on a product that they could not sell in America. So they made a huge profit. They dropped the product in Japan, Spain, and France. By the way, Joe, government officials in France that allowed that to happen actually had to go to prison for it. In America, not one corporate executive for this company has been indicted or even criminally investigated by our Justice Department.
Why not? What, you're telling me that these people that dumped this AIDS-tainted blood in foreign countries, who killed children, have not been taken to task in the United States?
It's worse than that. The U.S. government allowed it to happen. The FDA allowed this to happen. And now the government is completely looking the other way. Thousands of innocent hemophiliacs have died from the AIDS virus. And not only they're dying, their family members are dying because they're becoming infected with the disease. This company knew absolutely that they had a problem with the product. They knew that it was infected with AIDS. They dumped it because they wanted to turn this disaster into a profit.
Mike, I want to read to you what Bayer told the New York Times about this scandal. They said Bayer behaved responsibly, ethically, and humanely. Decisions made nearly 2 decades ago were based on the best scientific information of the time and were consistent with the regulations in place. That sounds like a lot of legal mumbo-jumbo. Now, you say you have internal documents that show that they knew that this drug they were dumping was tainted with the AIDS drug? Or the AIDS virus?
The documents show that there was no question that this company absolutely understood the risk, that they knew that it was contaminated. It wasn't a possibility. They knew it was contaminated. Americans were dying from the product before it was pulled off the market. The only reason it was pulled off the market is because lawyers found the documents and showed it to the government, and finally the government said you can't sell it here, but then the government allowed them to dump it in Spain, France, and Japan.
That's amazing. That's just amazing.
Well,
I want to read to you what the New York Times said, and this is an investigation that they also did, and they said the federal government was part of the problem while the Food and Drug Administration told the company not to ship the drugs overseas. The man responsible for the drug supply, quote, asked that the issue be quietly solved without alerting the Congress, the medical community, and the public. This is a cover-up, and our Congress is not doing anything. What should Americans do?
Edward Hooper, a British journalist,